Okay guys, this is John, your boy in Bavaria. We're going to continue our talk for a few minutes about Sharia law. Now, the thing we should first state is Sharia law is Islamic law. It's the body of law that has grown out of the teachings of Islam. So when you get Islam, you don't just get religion, you get law too. There are lots of technical books on this subject which are interesting and are maybe well worth reading, but I'm just going to give you a few examples out of the news and how those things are playing out. The first thing I want to say is, for whom does Sharia law benefit? For whom is it a good thing? It's a good thing if you're a man and you're a Muslim. Depending on what culture you are in, it may be very advantageous also if you're an Arab. It may be very advantageous, for instance, if you're in a Sunni country, to be a Sunni Muslim and not a Shia Muslim, and vice versa. But ultimately, Sharia law is definitely constructed to the benefit of Muslim males. Let's talk just for a minute about women. So we've had these recent protests, which many of us have seen in the news, of women against being forced to wear certain garments, hijab, etc. in Iran. And just this week in the news, the female attorney who had been protecting the rights of those women, or trying to, was sentenced to 33 years in jail plus 150 lashes. So I would just say, think about that as a woman and as a woman trying to assist other women. I would also like to just talk about female genital mutilation. Now, many people have said this is just a cultural thing, and I would not tell you that there may not be cultural biases, but in many Muslim nations, the rates of this are outrageous. They're astronomical, over 80%, sometimes much higher. That amounts to up to tens of millions of women in a single country who have undergone this procedure. I'll give you another little example. I was visiting Ireland a few years back. This was maybe 2015. And there was an article in the paper, and the upshot of that article was that they had estimated in the previous year up to 4,000 young Islamic girls had been taken from the United Kingdom into Ireland for the purpose of having that procedure, because they thought that it would be easier to conceal that in Ireland as opposed to the United Kingdom. So those are just a few things to think about. When it comes to young ladies, you can also look at the rates of child marriage, or the rates of marriage of very young teenage girls to much older men. And those rates are really astronomically higher in many Muslim nations. So that's just a little sketch of what is going on with some women and some children in the Islamic world. The next thing I want to talk about is Christians and Jews. There is a famous verse. It's from Surah 9, verse 29, and I will put that up. And this talks about Christians and Jews and the way that they are to be treated. This comes out of the Quran. And this has been the basis for much Islamic law. There's actually a lot of information given about the way Christians and Jews are to be treated. As you will see from this, one of the things that is required of Christians and Jews is the payment of the jizya. Now, this is a special tax, or some would say a tribute, that is a form actually of protection tax to allow Christians and Jews to be, quote, protected, living under submission of their Muslim overlords. There are also many more sections concerning what Christians may wear, what kind of jobs they may have. It's interesting that even the nation of Pakistan recently, in certain parts of the country, had passed legislation which stated that street sweepers, which are like the lowest on the caste system, were only allowed to be Christian. So much of that discrimination is still going on today. If you look at the payment of this jizya, which again is a form of extortion really, and you say, well, gee, that's not going on in the world today. Most historians will tell you that that ended throughout the Mediterranean theater in places like Algeria, Tunisia, even Egypt. When what happened? It ended in the 19th century when those countries were taken over by colonial Western European nations. Also, we don't have to look far back in history. When the Islamic State in the past had gone into various areas of Syria and Iraq, into Christian communities, some of those communities had been in existence for over a millennium. And when they came in, They said, either you will pay that tax or you will forfeit your life. A lot of those people said, hey, we've been living here for a long time. We haven't been paying that tax. We're not going to pay that tax. And guess what? They were killed and their properties were confiscated. This is very much a part of Islamic law traditionally and has been enforced up to the present time. The next thing we could talk about is Hinduism, because Sharia law deals not just with Christians and Jews, but also with other people. Hindus are considered polytheists, and we look at the nation of India and the assaults that the Indian people were subjected to the period from 1000 to 1500. There were terrible invasions from multiple Muslim warlords. Will Durant, in A Story of Civilization, actually estimated that up to 80 million Hindus were killed during this period. More contemporary historians who have looked at the records and the demographic data has suggested that that number could have been higher than 100 million. So we have to say, if you're a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu, that you would be treated differently than a Muslim male. If we also look at atheist agnostics, they're even lower on the totem pole. And we can look today at the nation of Bangladesh, where many famous atheist and agnostic bloggers have actually been killed. Think about that. So friends, again, what I would say to you is Sharia law is a part of Islam. It's the jurisprudence or the legal aspect of it. So when people see Muslim people in the public eye, especially politicians, it's a fair question to ask where they stand on this issue. And I'll tell you why, in case you haven't figured it out by now. If you're a woman, even a Muslim woman, or a child, particularly a female, if you're a Christian, if you're a Jew, a Hindu, a Buddhist, any other religion, or an agnostic, or an atheist, there are very definite and distinct disadvantages to being forced to live under Sharia law. And those are things that you do not want to subject yourself to. If we look at the historical record, that is never in your best interest. The last thing I'd like to mention is simply freedom of speech. There is actually regulation of freedom of speech under Sharia law. What you can say, what you cannot say. Certain things you can say about the Prophet Muhammad or even about Allah. There are actually some regulations which are being enforced today where Christians are not even allowed to say those words. Certainly not anything critical. But just to say those words is forbidden. Remember Asia Bibi. Asia Bibi is the lady in Pakistan who was accused of blasphemy. But her actual charge was not saying anything hateful or critical about Muslims or Islam or Muhammad. Her crime was drinking from a fountain that had been specified to be Muslim only. So when you look at all that, please be aware of what's going on. Be aware that Sharia law is never in your advantage. And be very critical when you hear politicians say that they are supportive of any aspect of Sharia law, because it is not congruent and it poses a real threat to many people in society. Okay, those are my thoughts for the day, folks. I hope you're having a good one. Until the next time, this is John, your boy in Bavaria. Take care. Bye-bye.